Jackson depict the men in military uniforms and on horses associated with them during the Civil War. Virginia law makes it illegal for local municipalities to remove war monuments. Moore said his ruling doesn't guarantee that the plaintiffs will win if the lawsuit goes to trial. His ruling was only on the issue of whether the statues are considered war memorials. Keith Peters reported.
Russian authorities claim 100,000 people took part in the May Day rally in central Moscow. Moscow police say the rally, organized by Kremlin-friendly trade unions, took place on Red Square. Other protests held today in Paris and in Madrid. More on these stories at townhall.com.
I'm having a nice gentleman here.
The following is an American Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of American Matters Media.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. I am your host today along with my co-host Leland Faegre. And as usual, there's quite a bit in the news on this warm May Day. We just heard on the news that today
I'm sorry, did you say May Day?
May Day, yes. We just heard on the news that today is May Day.
Warm May Day.
Yes. And I call it Remembering Victims of Communism Day.
Although we all have a version, I think.
Yes. And then the Irish side of me likes to think of it as the Feast of Beltane, which is fires. It welcomes the coming of spring, and the saying is that when maidens went out in the fields to pick May flowers, they seldom returned as maidens.
Well, that's the pagan in you.
Yes, I know. All right, so on this lovely day, we have quite a bit to talk about. Today, Attorney General Barr is testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And you know what they say about politicians. How do you know when they're lying? Their lips are moving.
Uh-huh. Well, as it turns out, the New York Times and the Washington Post, on the eve of his testimony today, proclaimed that Mueller apparently had some gripe with Barr's interpretation of his report. But as it turns out, that wasn't the case at all. Mueller was complaining about the media's representation of the report.
Well, yeah, well, the media...
but you'd have to go down the 13th paragraph in order to find that.
Okay, yeah.
See how they do that.
And then if they retract it, it'll be on the 8th page on the bottom.
Exactly. That's their technique, and they do it very effectively.
Yes. Because, most people cannot look beyond the headlines and see what the truth is. And we had a lot of that yesterday with the demonstrations in Venezuela, where the American people got almost 99% boilerplate, and those who should have spoken out against the boilerplate were silent, except for 2 or 3 people that had a certain amount of courage and spoke truth to power like we try to do here.
Right, and I don't think there were more than 2 or 3.
Yes, exactly.
And we're talking about Fox now.
Yes.
Heaven knows what they're doing over on the socialist networks.
Well, it's all the same thing, except CNN kind of stopped calling Random Guaido the interim president, which is a complete joke because they have a president, so how can he be an interim president? And but of course,
because Bolton proclaimed him as the interim.
Oh yes, and
that's how.
Well, what Bolton says goes, as we've seen all over the world, in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and
North
Libya
Korea.
and North Korea. Oh yes. And the North Koreans were not very happy with Bolton and Pompeo.
No, they were not.
No, they called them all kinds of names and said, and the Russians have said it too. They said America is not agreement capable.
This is going to be a very interesting litmus test for the administration, because Trump won't put up with this. This is incompetence for, as anyone can look at it can see. Now, yesterday it was supposed to happen, and some, Maduro was on the plane ready to get out.
Oh, yes.
They came up with that story about 4 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time.
Uh-huh.
And oops, no, I guess the Russians prevailed. Darn those Russians.
It was probably a Boeing MAX 8, so they were afraid to take off.
Probably was. Hadn't thought of that one. You're right.
But you know, the fact is that we're just getting so much misinformation. It's incredible, and it's all following the same pattern. And first of all, he's a dictator when he was the one that was duly elected. And second of all, he's committing genocide against his own people. That's what Rick Scott came out with. He used the
wasn't just Rick
G
Scott,
word.
wasn't it? It was the entire Florida delegation.
Oh
it
yeah,
sounded
they're
like.
all
Yeah.
they're all on the same party.
Rubio and I think there was another one in there.
Yeah, guess who's down there too now? Is a congresswoman from Florida, Donna Shalala.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she took that competitive seat down there in the last election. Yeah.
And there's also an Hispanic congressman that was on Tucker Carlson last night saying it's a national security threat. Russia's there, and China's there, and Cuba's there. And, you know, I mean, Russia has 100 people there. They're building their S-400 or S-300. They didn't get the most up-to-date, but they got the second generation air missile defense system around their military bases, and they sent some technicians up to the dam to try and figure out what's happening with the electricity.
All they had to do was call Pompeo.
Yes. And and you know, the Cubans, I mean, they keep saying that there are 25,000 Cuban soldiers there, but in fact, a good deal of them are most likely doctors, because Cuba always sends out thousands of doctors and hopes that they all don't defect. But
Was it doctors in quotes?
no, real doctors.
Real
I mean, yeah,
doctors?
Cuba, you know, they get paid $25 a month, but they're really good doctors, supposedly. And Cuba sends them out to other countries, has been for years, because that's their main claim to fame, their healthcare system, which is very, very good for tourists like Michael Moore.
Because they have to deliver on it.
Yeah, but not so good for the average Cuban person. You know, like all socialist medicine, you know, you get some things done well, some minor things, but if you have to have major surgery or something, then, you know, the waiting list goes on and on. And
Does a heart bypass even exist there? Is that possible?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
But I think didn't Chavez come to America for his, or somebody did recently come to America to get their heart bypass instead of staying home with their socialist medicine?
Mick Jagger came to New York.
Oh yeah, Mick Jagger did.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Because, you know, Hugo Chavez, Mick Jagger.
Two sides of the same coin, huh?
I just see here on Drudge now that the CNN is, let's see, where did it go? It's gone now. Oh, there's 160,000-year-old human relative remains discovered. So there's always something going on there in the archaeological world. And we're coming up on a break here. What do you want to talk about as we go after the commercial break?
Well, I don't know. We can figure something out, but if you don't want to talk any more about Venezuela, I'm sure we'll find a
I love
topic.
Venezuela. As a matter of fact, I'm curious whether it was a coup or not, because everybody's saying it wasn't a coup.
Oh, well, everybody that matters.
Yeah.
You know.
It looked like a coup to me.
Yes.
It was a coup d'etat if I ever saw one.
All right.
On TV.
We'll be right back after the break.
Destination Midtown. Experience the difference. Reno's premier shopping extravaganza.
Hey, lady! What's for lunch today? Out to lunch. Mondays at noon. 1180 KCKQ. A production of America Matters Media.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
Hello again, and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor, my co-host Leland Faegre. And you know, through all the coverage of the coup in Venezuela, it was really not clear exactly how small this demonstration really was, at least the core demonstration.
Right.
Random Guaido and the recently released Leopoldo Lopez, who was arrested because 2 years ago when they had a similar attempt at a coup. Oh, I used that word. I shouldn't use that word.
It wasn't a coup.
Yeah, I know.
I know this because
Maduro is the coup.
Because
yes.
they all told me it wasn't a coup.
Yes.
That's how I know it wasn't a coup.
The demonstrations there were obviously more violent, and they were the dissidents were accused of stringing wire across roads to unseat motorcycle riders.
Unseat them?
Yes.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yes, who knows, maybe decapitate them, I don't know. But the thing is that he was under house arrest, and Guaido's only victory yesterday was getting him sprung from his house. I don't know whether they broke the bracelet or whatever, but
Yeah.
anyway, he was there, standing there by his side.
With a token of soldiers, defected
Yes.
soldiers.
There were about 30 people, as far as the videos that we can see. There was one machine gun. They were on a bridge across from a military base, and there was one machine gun, and they had small arms, rifles and pistols, some of which were identified as U.S. made. I wonder how they got those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so Guaido made his call for the army to defect, and some of the National Guard showed up, and then promptly, within a short period of time, surrendered to government forces and said they were deceived about that they thought it was a demonstration and not a call for an insurrection.
Right.
And so they
Because
surrendered.
because it wasn't a coup.
Oh, no, of course not.
I know this because the media told me it
Yes.
wasn't a coup.
Yes, and the media, of course, always tells us exactly what the administration tells us. We know that from Glenn Greenwald. Their media in America sees its only job is transcribing exactly what the administration spokespeople tell us they should say. So we tell you what to write, and thank you for that.
And this goes to Operation Mockingbird, the CIA infiltration of the mass media that goes way back several decades. So it's still in operation. We still see it every single day.
Gee, do you mean that Wolf Blitzer and some of these other guys,
Anderson Cooper?
Anderson Cooper, were ex-CIA? Who would have thunk?
Well, certainly not the millennials.
No.
They're not aware of it. That's why we're doing it here. That's why we're talking about it here. So
Yes.
to fill in those gaps.
Yes, because, there's the biggest conspiracy theory is the conspiracy to tell you there's no conspiracy.
That's the perfect one, isn't it? It's
Yes.
the most convenient conspiracy theory.
So, at any rate, there were supposedly 40 persons injured or killed. We don't really know.
I heard specifically that those were deaths
Deaths?
this morning.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's very little evidence to suggest that there were that many killed. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was
I do think that truck ran over a couple of people.
Did you?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, the video clip I saw, it looked to me like they scrambled out of the way.
Most of them did,
Yeah.
I think, but some were caught, I think, on the front there. But, again, this is the kind of propaganda that looks very good on television.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
So
And they don't really show, although I did see it, but they don't talk about how some of the armored vehicles were on fire from Molotov cocktails being thrown at
I
them.
never saw any vehicle on fire.
I did. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
I didn't see one.
Okay. So anyway, the upshot of all this is that again, we're getting fed a lot of propaganda, except for two sources that I really would like to give praise to. One was in Tucker Carlson's show, and I was wondering what Tucker's approach would be. And I was wondering if he would go neocon for once or say, talk about how Venezuela's on our doorstep. And he did have one of the Republican Congress critters from Florida, a Hispanic person. I'm sorry I didn't copy down his name, but we don't have, even though we have a great engineer here named Craig, we don't have instant access to a teleprompter or anything like that.
We
But
don't have
anyway,
that clip.
yeah, he was talking about this is a great security threat, and the Russians are there, and the Chinese are there, and the Cubans are there. And Tucker did a great job of just facing him down. And
Yeah, he did.
he did, exactly. And then he also had an Hispanic woman on in the last 5 minutes of his show, and that was outstanding. Again, I don't have her name. I apologize. You can find it. But she says she spent 3 months in Venezuela, and she said we're getting absolutely the wrong impression of what's going on, that random Guaido really doesn't have that much support outside of the wealthy districts in Caracas and so on, and that she called for she said Donald Trump came in to drain the swamp, but his national security advisors are the swamp,
Yeah.
and he has to get rid of them, meaning Bolton and Pompeo and...
And I think that will be the effect of this, particularly if it's not successful. These guys are going to be held accountable for their behavior. Pompeo, I mean, he wants to work with these people, but, he puts these people on the line. You have to perform or you're out. And I'd love to see Bolton out on the street. You know?
Oh, I would too, Ben.
There's plenty of people to replace him from the same source, the Council on Foreign Relations, but at least they'll be, you know, in and out, the revolving door that way.
Every day when I wake up, I say a little prayer. But he was great. And then again, Tulsi Gabbard was on several talk shows, not specifically yesterday. I didn't catch her. She may have been, but over the weekend. And they kept peppering her with the usual propaganda about Venezuela. And she stood firm and she said, it's up to the Venezuelan people. It's not up to us to intervene in Venezuela. So congratulations to Tulsi. And even though she has a leftist point of view on some economic issues, I still support her. I'm not one of those people that are going to pull back because she's not completely free market in economic areas, because I really believe that the most important thing we have to do is end imperialism. You know, they keep talking about these countries, these axes of evil that we're supposed to be fighting. The latest one is the one in our own hemisphere, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. They're supposed to be the axis of evil. Well, the real axis of evil to me is not a country, but ideas. And I would say the axis of evil, as far as ideas go, are imperialism, Wahhabism, and Zionism. Those are the three axes of evil that we have, and they're all interrelated.
They're right up there.
Yeah, they're all the same side of the coin.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about those being any kind of evil, but it's ideas that are evil, not necessarily countries.
And I think the sophistry that's associated with the administration, the neocon effect that's working within the administration is what's interesting. The invocation of the Monroe Doctrine, for example.
Yes.
They continue to quote or use that phrase because it's so sophisticated.
Oh, yes.
And what it amounts to is just plain old sophistry. You know, it's phony.
Yeah, distortion of the reality of what the Monroe Doctrine really was.
Absolutely. But it sounds so good, you know, and this is how the millennials are going to be brought into this, I think, you know.
Yes. And but of course, other countries cannot have a sphere of influence like we can, and we can tell everybody what to do, but not only in our own hemisphere, but around the world, although we're failing around the world to get anybody to listen to us anymore. But in our own hemisphere, if Venezuela survives and does not implode over this whole thing, then again we'll be shown to be impotent even in our own hemisphere. And then what are we going to come up with?
Yeah.
What kind of doctrine will that pretend to be?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. And so, like you say, is Donald pushing these people forward to see if they'll fail? Is he playing 3D chess again? Or is he simply unaware or unschooled or doesn't care or actually believes in what they're doing? And so, again, will the real Donald Trump please stand up?
Well, it's the former. I will attest to that. And I just think that he's overwhelmed by this whole thing. And there was did you see where Ron Paul suggested that the administration, what was that most recent article? Did you see that? Where he suggested that because of these failures, a lot of people will, you know, pull away from the administration going forward and weaken his candidacy in 2020, effectively.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, if he does invade, I'm sure that would turn a lot of Trumpsters off, because a lot of Trumpsters are non-interventionists.
Yeah.
There's even been a study done that showed that those counties in the Midwest that had the most casualties from foreign wars are the ones that voted for Trump. And the alt-right, whatever you may think of their race realism, is a non-interventionist movement along with us, the libertarians and the paleo-conservatives.
Right.
Yeah, so we would be extremely disappointed, and that's why I'm supporting Tulsi, because I think we need a voice, whether or not she's going to go anywhere. She did get her 65,000 independent contributions, so she will at least be in the debates, but I'm sure she'll be at the far end of the debate, maybe get 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah, she'll be off stage somewhere.
Yes, so the Democrats are giving her the same treatment the Republicans gave Ron Paul. And it's
For the same reason.
Yeah, for exactly the same reason. She's too threatening to the all of these media outlets. Of course, are heavily tied in with the military-industrial complex and the profits they make, and the oil and everything else.
Yeah, and the foreign policy establishment.
Yes. So, at any rate, we will have to consider the other side of the coin. If we're being lied to about what's going on in Venezuela, what else are we being lied to about?
Well, the Mueller report.
Okay, yes, we are being lied to about that.
For one thing, because I wanted to get this in sometime during the show, apparently only 2 legislators have gone to see that unredacted report.
Only 2, huh?
And guess what? They're Republicans.
Oh.
Not a single
Democrat
socialist has been in there to look at that that's all they could talk about, was they wanted that unredacted report. It's sitting in there, and no one has gone in there to look at it. We'll be back.
Hi, this is Ken Roberts, the host of Ken's Bulls and Bears Report. If you own real estate, paper, and other assets, congratulations. Now, you need protection. We live in a litigious society. Those with assets are sued.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
Hi, and welcome back. Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, and our co-host, Leland Faegre. And before we get back to our hot topics of the day, we'd like to give a shout-out to Reno Computer Services, our sponsor. They are Reno's premier PC malware removal, data recovery service, and they offer routine maintenance and preventive action to keep your PCs running smoothly and without virus, and good for personal or business services. You can reach them at www.renocomputerservices.com or give them a call at 775-737-4400. And so we were going to get to change topics just a bit, and what's been in the news is that the Democratic candidates are coming forth with all of their grandiose proposals to spend money that we don't have.
Is that what you call them, grandiose proposals?
Grandiose proposals, yes, of course. In order to, like you say, get the millennials hooked. And
anything free.
Yes. And so a couple of things we would like to talk about, and one of them goes back to, and this is a fallacy that many Republicans hold to, and that the economy is basically static. It's like a pie, and you need the government to cut up the pie and give it to the most deserving people, when the economy is actually a dynamic, changing organism.
I have it. Here's the expression I'm thinking of. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs.
I wonder who said that.
I don't know.
But so when Bernie Sanders, for example, starts talking about how the rich are getting richer but the poor are getting poorer, he is basically reflecting this economic fallacy that there are winners and losers in economic exchanges, when for the most part, the vast majority of times, it's a winner-winner situation. You sell something to somebody, and they buy it, and you each think that you've gotten a good deal because you gave away something you didn't need quite as much as you needed the money, and the buyer got something he needs a little bit more than he needs that money right now.
You're not going to describe that as a willing buyer and a willing seller, are you?
I think I heard that phrase somewhere.
It's a damn good expression.
Yes.
I like it.
So if the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting richer too. Now, the left is going to scream that they're not getting rich fast enough. But so, for example, I think Bernie is saying the rich are getting 200% wealthier, while the poor are getting 30% richer. Well, so what? I mean, 30% wealthier is better than 200. Is not 200%, but is better than getting poorer, like he said.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as an ideal fairness.
Exactly.
You know, it's just built into nature.
Yep, and as Milton Friedman famously said, I have perused the Constitution, and nowhere do I find the word fair.
Can't find fair in there. On that one.
So, and you know, for the first time in history recently, in the last few years, the entire planet, more than 50% of the world in today's world are basically middle class.
Yeah,
meaning,
isn't that staggering?
Yes, meaning that they can save a few bucks every month, that they're not living exactly paycheck to paycheck. And this is phenomenal. I mean, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, I mean, people were basically serfs. They were chained to their agricultural pursuits, and they had no advancement whatsoever. And in the space of 200 years, we've gone from this type of society, for the most part, where over half of the world is now middle class.
And there's a word for that. What I'm trying to come up with the word. What I'm thinking of it right now. It's coming to me.
Economic growth.
Capitalism.
Oh gosh, yeah, I know. But you know, capitalism is a bad word according to a lot of people that we're hearing from on the left and the Democrats. And, you know, the Republicans talk about capitalism, but they have a good deal of cronyism built into their capitalism. So it's not really. So I like to call it currently existing capitalism. Just like when Russia was still communist, then the left used to say Russia is currently existing socialism. I would say, well,
it's a play on words.
Yes, capitalism is currently existing capitalism. It can get a lot better, but the way to get a lot better is not through more government, more regulations.
Which is what Trump has done in his 2 years, is deregulate.
Yes, and you know, it's not so much deregulate with the regulations that are already existing, but it's stopping new regulations that's most important. And you know, there have been several studies that come out that don't get a lot of attention because of the fact that they don't fit into this main narrative, that if we had stopped regulating around the time of the New Deal, and instead of the average wage for Americans now, adjusted for inflation, is $50,000 a year. If we had stopped the regulations after the New Deal, we would have at least twice, maybe 3 times as much in average income for Americans. And
yeah, the New Deal was very detrimental.
Yes, but even more detrimental is what happened afterwards with the income tax and the growth of the welfare state. Post-World War II. So the rich are getting richer, but the poor are also getting richer. And inequality really doesn't matter. Like you said, I mean, I cannot play basketball like, you know, an NBA pro, or I can't catch a football like Odell Beckham Jr. And so people are going to be more you know, successful than I am in many ways, and I'm going to be more successful than other people. We're all human beings, we're all individuals, and we're not cloned. So equality is a revolt against nature.
Yeah, and not everybody can play basketball.
Exactly.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
So that's one of the fallacies I would like to get to. And another one is kind of similar because it's this whole new Green Deal aspect about how the world is going to come to an end and it's all doom if we don't eliminate emissions.
Well, Beto's got a fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you hear about a fix?
No, I heard about, he wants to, what does he want to do?
He wants to delay it out.
Oh, to 2050
yeah.
instead? Yeah.
Instead of 2030.
AOC says it's 2030. Beto says it's 2050. And if we don't get to zero emissions by that time, you know, we're all doomed. It's the end of the world. And I guess millennials are buying into it to some degree.
It does make you wonder.
Yeah.
I have no idea how they could, but it seems to suggest they do.
Well, what they're doing is basing the science that they claim they understand and we don't.
Yeah.
That they're basing this on is a IPCC science that says that there's not talk at all about the end of the world or doom. It says that if we don't reduce emissions significantly enough and we do nothing, the world will get 3.5 degrees warmer by the next century, 2200. And
well, we're going to be gone by that time.
I know, but you know, somehow I think even the scientists that they claim they understand says we're going to muddle through.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. So the world gross domestic product right now. I'm going to get into some math, folks, so I'm sorry. But
you might want to take some notes.
Yeah. The world's GDP now is $80 trillion, give or take. A trillion here, a trillion there, who's counting? But and the average U.S. salary, as I just mentioned, is $50,000 a year. So if we assume a 3% annual growth rate, by the turn of the next century, the world's economic domestic product, gross domestic product, will be $800 trillion. People don't realize that we're getting richer and richer every generation.
Yeah.
You know, they see a static worldview, and that's all they see.
Well, Pocahontas understands that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want to malign.
Because she's reaching into that bucket to pay for all these programs.
So most of the world, most scientists believe that actually the world population will peak around 2050 at about 9 billion and remain pretty steady there, based on the fact that when people get wealthier, they generally tend to have fewer children and explore their individuality more. So if we divide that up by 80 trillion, by 9 billion, we get an average salary of about $98,000 a year for every person.
About twice what it is now.
Yes, right. So if we do nothing about anthropogenic global warming, and the temperatures do rise by 3.5 degrees, the average salary would be $90,000 instead of $98,000 a year. Now, that's kind of bad. It's kind of, but when you think about it that way, it's hardly the end of the world.
Yeah, but we won't be here.
Oh, well, of course not. We won't be here. But, you know, the millennials might be here, or at least their children. And it's something that they are not being told. And they have no idea of this concept that the world is continuously getting richer. Who knows what advancements? I mean, these are all projections into, you know, for 80 years in the future. Who knows what advancements science will come up with? In fact, you know, I don't know about me, but I mean, these the millennials, the new generations, they may have an average life expectancy of 130, 40, 50 years. Who knows?
Yeah, you don't.
You don't.
Really don't.
No. And so the idea that the world is going to come to an end and it's all gloom and doom if we don't get rid of automobiles and airplanes, and we build trains, and we do like Mayor de Blasio says he's going to do in New York, and retrofit all the buildings in New York City and forbid any new skyscrapers and all that baloney.
He's a piece of work, isn't he?
I know. When you think of communists, I mean, the poster child for American communist is Mayor Bill in New York.
He is something else. And those that have to suffer in his provinciality there, it's just hard to comprehend that.
Yeah, I know. That's why people are fleeing.
Yep, in droves.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming up on a break, and what do we want to do on the next segment? Anything in particular?
Well, we could get back to foreign affairs if you'd like.
All right.
Okay.
Stay with us.
Hi there, Leroy Marshall here to welcome you to our new world-famous Marshall Mint.
To find out what's hot and happening, join Lady J for Smooth Jazz Tune-Up.
Join me Saturdays, 10 to noon, here on America Matters.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. My co-host Leland Faegre and I are discussing the hot news topics of the day. And you know, while we were fomenting a coup, I said the wrong word again.
Wasn't a coup.
No, a coup in Venezuela. And while we were telling Iran that we were going to cut off all their oil supplies, well, we named the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And we also are now threatening to name the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. That's another one. Mm-hmm. The fact is that the real enemy of freedom in the world, Vladimir Putin, of Russia, because Putler, you know, he's a mix of communism and fascism.
Pronouncing that right?
Yes, he's the new Hitler. He's Putler. Vladimir Putler was over the last week while we were doing all these things, he met with Kim Jong-un for the first time at a summit to discuss the failed summit in Hanoi. And Kim Jong-un, of course, is not at all happy about Trump's foreign affairs team, especially Pompeo and Bolton. If you recall, they had an agreement based on the 4 proposals that we agreed to in Hanoi, which is a step-by-step process.
Effectively going into the summit, that agreement was apparently...
Yeah, our envoy, contrary to people's opinion, had a deal worked out and ready to go. All they needed was the signatures and a press conference. And then Bolton showed up and moved the goalposts at the last minute and demanded complete denuclearization. I think, as he put it, we want to be able to drive the trucks up and pull away with the missiles. You know?
Bolton is very popular.
Yes. And he also got a bad word from the foreign minister of Iran. Iran appealed directly to the president and said, you know, these people are undermining
everything we're trying to do.
Yes. So, again, we're hoping that Donald is listening and that eventually he's going to get rid of these characters. But anyway, Putler met with Kim Jong-un. And you know,
sorry, who was it?
Putler.
Oh, Putler. That's
yes.
right, I keep forgetting that.
Yes. He met with Kim Jong-un, and you know, the Russians and the Koreans have gotten along very well for centuries. They haven't had that rivalry that Russia often has with the Chinese.
That war thing going on?
So they've been on friendly relations. Russia is popular. In fact, misogyny in Russia is mostly between Slavic peoples and Asians, including the Koreans.
And that's where it deserves to be, by the way.
But at any rate... so after that, he went to a major conference with Xi Jinping and China and the other Eurasian countries to further advance their Belt and Road Initiative of China, which is building infrastructure throughout Eurasia and trying to raise economic growth. And Putler he again made this... said that it was within everything that he's talked about since 2006, which is the individual national sovereignty and cooperation, where you can cooperate, and respect for differences where there are differences. And so they spoke about economic development of all the countries in Eurasia while maintaining their sovereignty. And, of course, Bolton and Pompeo think that this is very nefarious, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the whole point is to get these countries in debt to China so China can take over their resources, you know, kind of like the IMF does.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Which our tax dollars pay for.
Yes.
you know, to his credit, Putler wants to an inactive nuclear peninsula.
Yes, he does.
He wants those weapons to go away.
Oh, yeah, sure he does.
Yeah, and said so. So
yep.
There's common ground there.
Yep. So, but anyway, we have to keep an eye on Putler and the Chinese, because we know how nefarious and malign their activities are, including the Iranians and so on, into their axis of evil. But and so this kind of boomeranged against the 29-year-old Russian woman named Maria Butina, who came over here to, she's a gun rights activist in Russia. And she came over, her organization is called the Right to Bear Arms. Imagine that. And she came over here to interact with the NRA and maybe some Republican officials.
Find some mentors.
Yeah, find some mentors, try to see if she can learn some organizing techniques and so on. And this is called citizen diplomacy. And we can't have that.
No.
No.
And that judge that sentenced her is an Obama appointee.
Yes, and she's a black woman. And so we have this white Russian woman, a Becky, as they call them, as the woke crowd likes to call it, white women that vote conservative. And so she threw the book at her. And, you know, because there were all the ingredients to do so. She was for arms.
She's Russian.
Yeah, she's Russian. She's a white woman. She's for the right to bear arms.
Right, right.
I mean, how wrong can you be?
Got to put her away.
Yes. So that's
she has got to go.
Yes. So She's already done 9 months, some of it in solitary confinement, which is equivalent to torture.
And would she get another 9 on?
And she got another 9 on top of that.
Amazing.
You know, she confessed to what she did, hoping that, you know, she would get the deportation, be able to get the heck out of here.
She told prosecutors what they wanted to hear,
Exactly.
and then they snubbed her.
Yep, they still turned on her, and but you know, justice is blind, as they like to say, except when it's not colorblind. But at any rate, the thing that she was convicted under was the notorious Foreign Agent Registration Act, this act was passed in 1938 under the FDR administration to silence opposition to the U.S. entry into World War II. You know, we had the greatest middle-class Western, and when I speak Western, I mean basically out of Chicago and the Midwest, anti-war movement that the country has ever seen.
Yeah.
The America First movement.
In the nation's interior.
Yes, in the nation's interior. Cyrus, I think, anyway, the Chicago Tribune was one of the leading voices for it, and Charles Lindbergh, who was German.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was there too, and of course, they were all anti-Semitic Nazis. We know that now. But so the FARA was passed so that would make all of these people register as foreign agents. And only a handful of cases were ever prosecuted. Between 1966 and 2015, the Justice Department brought a total of 7 FARA cases for prosecution. But now the FARA violations are being trumpeted all the time. We know that Manafort went to jail partly because he didn't register as a foreign agent, and they say that half of Washington should register, and they don't.
Yeah, I don't think there's been more than a handful of people that ever registered as a foreign agent. And that's been a criticism of the law for years. I mean, I remember hearing about this in, gosh, it must have been late 70s.